My name is Olivia, I'm 32, and I'm the creative director at a large agency in Minneapolis. I was standing at my sister Chloe's wedding and, it would seem, I should have been ready for another one of my mother's remarks, but her words still hurt me deeply. Your sister's wedding was perfect, wasn't it? She said with pride, and several relatives smiled, looking in my direction. When are you going to find someone for yourself? Otherwise, you'll end up alone and unwanted. I kept a smile on my face and calmly replied, "Oh, I already have. The wedding already happened. You just weren't invited." A complete silence fell over the room. If you want to hear the story of how my secret wedding became my greatest victory, give this a like and subscribe. Write in the comments what city you're watching from, and I'll tell you how I finally managed to stand up for myself. I spent my childhood in a picture-perfect, postcard glossy house in Edina, a prestigious suburb of Minneapolis. In our world, the facade was everything. Our lawn was mowed with geometric precision, the family portraits on the mantelpiece were arranged in a flawless composition, and every crumb of our social standing was carefully guarded from any misfortune. The main lesson I learned from a very young age in the Preston family was simple: it doesn't matter how you really feel. All that matters is how others see you. My sister Chloe, who was 3 years older, had worn the golden child crown since birth. She was the perfect embodiment of everything our parents valued: athletic achievements, high grades, and, most importantly, an impeccable ability to fit in any society. She was the captain of the school tennis team, president of her class, and always dated young men from families with the right reputation. My parents' faces shone with pride at every victory of hers on the court and at every award ceremony. I, on the other hand, was a piece that didn't fit into their perfect picture from the very beginning. While Chloe was collecting trophies, I spent hours in my room, immersed in the world of sketches and fictional stories. Sometimes my mother would come in, look at my drawings, and sigh with poorly concealed disappointment. "Wouldn't it be more interesting for you to go to Emily's pool party? All your friends will be there." But I always preferred to create my own universes rather than trying to find a place for myself in others. My father, James, was emotionally absent most of the time. He would disappear at his law firm until late at night, and at home, he preferred not to interfere in family matters, completely trusting them to my mother. "Listen to your mother, Liv," was his universal answer to any of my attempts to argue with their expectations. He wasn't mean. He was just terrified of any conflict. My mother, Eleanor, was the main architect and guardian of our flawless image. A former beauty queen who had married well, she invested all her energy into creating the perfect family story. She hosted charity receptions, chaired the school board, and examined our lives under a microscope in search of the slightest flaw. Her criticism was always wrapped in a smile. "Darling, that color makes you look heavy. Let me pick something more flattering." Big family holidays turned into real achievement competitions. My Aunt Susan always started the parade of her daughter Haley's successes, casting meaningful glances at me. Haley just got promoted to senior associate at her firm. Such a driven girl. My other cousins would casually show off new engagement rings or show ultrasound pictures. And at that moment, my mother would squeeze my hand and whisper with emphasis, "Well, maybe your time will come next year." Once, on Thanksgiving, when I was 16, I accidentally overheard a conversation in the kitchen. My mother, Eleanor, was confiding in one of her friends. "We're still hoping that Olivia will get over this creative fever of hers," she was saying. "Chloe, of course, will go to the same university as her father. We have everything arranged there." I froze in the hallway with a plate of pie in my hands. At that moment, I realized for the first time, with painful clarity, to them, I was a disappointment. My only salvation was to escape into fictional worlds. The attic, after long months of persuasion, turned into my personal art studio. Among the canvases and the smell of oil paints, I could finally breathe. My parents turned a blind eye to it. My sanctuary was a convenient place to hide me from the eyes of their high-ranking guests. When it came time to choose a college, I, against their will, chose a university in New York. They insisted on something more prestigious and, more importantly, closer, on the East Coast, where I could be controlled. But New York is so far away. Eleanor lamented. And what will you do with your art degree? It's not serious. But this time, I didn't give in. I stood my ground to the end. The decision to stay in New York after graduation became my personal Independence Day. I rented a tiny apartment with a friend and got an entry-level position at a marketing agency. My parents, of course, considered it a temporary whim. They were sure that a year or two would pass, and I would return to Minneapolis, find a suitable husband from their circle, and finally become normal. Well, at least marketing is some kind of decent job, my mother gritted out during our weekly call. Although with your education, you could have found something better. But, to everyone's surprise, and first and foremost to my own, my career took off. It turned out I had a knack for good design and an intuitive understanding of what connects people with brands. In less than 5 years, I was already managing my own department. My parents could no longer openly criticize my work, the numbers spoke for themselves. But they quickly found a new target. It's wonderful that you're so successful at work, dear, my mother would say. But don't you think it's time to think about a family? The years are passing by. In my parents' world, every one of my achievements had a footnote in small print. Success was never just success, it was always accompanied by some but. My apartment in New York was lovely, but it's impossible to host decent receptions in it. My friends were smart and creative, but none of them are from the right circles. My financial independence was impressive, but can it really compare to the happiness of having your own family? In their eyes, I was always one step away from the ideal, but never reached it. By my 30th birthday, I had finally learned to defend myself. I realized that I couldn't change them, but I could change how often I exposed myself to their influence. Our weekly calls turned into monthly ones. Long, suffocating visits home were replaced by short trips for holiday weekends. Step by step, I built a life that brought me pleasure on its own, without requiring their approval as a mandatory ingredient. What I certainly couldn't have foreseen was that it would be love, not career, that would force me to come face to face with the very family drama I had so diligently kept at a distance. I met Noah on a raw New York evening. It was at an art gallery in Chelsea. I was there for work, doing a photo report from an exhibition opening for a corporate blog, when I felt a light touch on my shoulder. "Excuse me," said a pleasant male voice, "but in this light, you'd be better off closing the aperture a bit." I turned around, ready to politely but firmly dismiss the unsolicited advice. But instead, I saw a tall man with incredibly kind eyes. He was wearing work boots splattered with paint, which looked wild and at the same time surprisingly organic against the sterile concrete floors of the gallery. "I'm Noah," he said, smiling shyly and holding out his hand. "Sorry if I scared you. Occupational hazard, you know. I'm a photographer." There was something disarmingly sincere in his directness, and I, contrary to my usual habit, smiled. "I'm Olivia. And I'll gladly accept any help, because honestly, I'm looking more at the shutter button than through the viewfinder." We talked until the gallery closed, and the evening ended with his spontaneous invitation to continue the conversation somewhere else. I immediately realized that Noah was the complete opposite of what my family would want to see. An artist for whom creativity was more important than money. A man living in a former factory loft, not a prestigious penthouse. He measured success not by his bank account, but by the sense of satisfaction from his work. Of course, I was delighted. Our first date was a complete improvisation. An invitation for coffee turned into a search for the best pizza in town, at a small place in Greenwich Village, and ended with a long night walk through the streets of that neighborhood. Noah told me about his childhood in rural Michigan. His parents were teachers, and the main thing in their family was not reputation, but creative freedom. "My father built a darkroom for me in the basement when I was 14, he told me. And my mom would cut out articles about famous photographers from magazines and leave them on my pillow. No one ever asked if I had a backup plan." This contrast with my own upbringing was so palpable that it felt like a breath of fresh air. When I, stammering, told him stories about my family, Noah listened with an attention I had never received before. He didn't judge or give advice. "I think they're just scared," he said when I finished. People obsessed with the idea of a perfect picture are usually terrified of what's hidden beneath that glossy surface. Our relationship developed with surprising ease, without drama or unspoken issues. Noah's schedule was very flexible. He worked as a freelance photographer for magazines and at the same time had his own personal project, a photo chronicle of disappearing Brooklyn neighborhoods. We could spontaneously meet for lunch in the middle of the week, wander through street fairs on weekends, or just spend quiet evenings at home, cooking dinner together. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. That I was accepted. When we had been dating for 4 months, Noah asked if I wanted to meet his parents, who had just come from Michigan. I was terribly nervous right up until the moment I saw them. Anna and Stephen Miller walked into the restaurant with a loaf of homemade bread as a gift and a whole bunch of funny stories about Noah's childhood. They asked me about my work with genuine curiosity and, most strikingly, really listened to the answers. When I mentioned one of my advertising campaigns that I was particularly proud of, Anna immediately asked me to show it to her on my phone. "Olivia, you have a real gift," she said with such sincere warmth. "Now I understand why you're so successful." There was no double meaning in her words, no hidden hints. Just lively, genuine interest. Over dessert, Anna turned to me. "We're going to our lake house for the weekend of June 12th. Come if you want," she said with the same simple warmth. Stephen immediately added, "No pressure, of course, but we'd be very happy to have you." I went. And it was like a journey to another universe. The Millers' lake house had nothing in common with the luxurious country villas that my parents' friends had. It was tiny, furnished with mismatched furniture, and the board game boxes were always missing some pieces. But it didn't matter. Everyone who came there was truly, sincerely happy. Cousins played cards on the porch until late at night. Uncles and nephews cheerfully bickered at the grill, arguing about whose marinade was better. And not a single person all weekend asked me when I would settle down or find myself. When Noah and I had been dating for just over a year, he suggested we move in together. His loft was flooded with light, perfect for work, but my small apartment could boast a real, full-fledged kitchen. In the end, we found a compromise. We rented a brand new place, a 2-bedroom apartment with huge windows and a small balcony where we decided to grow mint and cherry tomatoes in the summer. Our careers developed in unison, without envy or competition. I got the position of creative director at my agency, and Noah landed a dream contract, a shoot for the New York Times Magazine. The success of one became a shared joy. When Noah won a grant to create a photo project about the bygone era of old resorts in the Catskill Mountains, I rearranged my entire schedule to go with him on short expeditions on weekends. Noah photographed the majestic ruins of abandoned hotels, and I searched local archives for old photographs and stories of people who remembered these places in their heyday. It was these long trips that became the foundation of our relationship. The hours spent in the car were filled with conversations about everything under the sun, from high politics to the most intimate childhood secrets. I told Noah things I had never admitted to anyone else, about that gnawing feeling of loneliness that had haunted me all my childhood, about the fear that maybe my parents were right after all, and one day I would bitterly regret my wrong choice. "What if I wake up one day," I asked him late one evening as we were returning from another trip, "and realized that I actually needed to be like Chloe?" Noah was silent for a minute, then pulled over to the side of the road and turned off the engine. He turned to me. "Liv, I've never met anyone who feels and understands themselves as subtly as you do. You created your life from scratch, on your own terms. Most people never have the courage to do that." And then there was that weekend in the Catskill Mountains. We were sitting on top of a hill, wrapped in a single blanket, watching the sun set behind the distant peaks. It was at that moment that Noah proposed to me. It wasn't like a movie. No photographers in the bushes, no fanfare. Just the two of us, a simple ring that had once belonged to his grandmother, and a simple question. "I don't need all that wedding circus," he said when I was finally able to breathe out a yes. "I just want to be your husband. And how exactly that happens, I don't care." And I thought about it. A wedding, with my family. I vividly imagined it all, my mother Eleanor's endless advice about every flower and every napkin. The inevitable comparisons with my cousins' perfect weddings. The insistent demands to invite the right business partners of my father, whom I had never even seen. The mere thought of it made my stomach clench. What if we just don't tell them? The words escaped me on their own, almost as a joke. What if we do it our way? Just you and me, and the few people who truly love us? Noah looked me in the eyes intently. Is that what you really want? He asked. And at that moment, I realized that yes. That this joking idea was actually my heart's deepest desire. Yes, I said, and there was no longer any doubt in my voice. That's exactly what I want. And so we began to prepare for our secret wedding. The guest list was short, only 15 names. Noah's parents, Anna and Stephen. His brother Ethan with his wife Sarah. And 11 of our closest friends, our chosen family, that we had found in New York. Instead of a banquet hall, we chose a small meadow in the Hudson Valley, a place that was special to both of us. We got all the necessary permits, and we asked our mutual friend, who was licensed to do so, to conduct the ceremony. Our wedding day greeted us with a clear and fresh, perfect October morning. I woke up in our shared bed, next to Noah. We had decided from the very beginning that the silly tradition of spending the night apart was not for us. Happy wedding day, he whispered in my ear, and that simple phrase warmed my heart. We were in no hurry. We cooked breakfast together and drank coffee on our small balcony, helping each other with a stubborn button or a stuck zipper. No crowd of bridesmaids, no minute-by-minute schedule, no tension. My outfit was simple but elegant, a flowing ivory dress adorned with delicate embroidery that I found in a small shop of local designers. Noah was in his favorite, slightly worn leather jacket and jeans, which were perfect for an autumn day. The only thing we decided to splurge on was a photographer. He was a good friend of Noah's who promised to capture candid moments, not torture us with hours of staged shoots. For the ceremony, we chose that same meadow in the Hudson Valley where we had spent so many unforgettable hours having picnics and talking about everything under the sun. Stephen, Noah's father, arrived a few hours early to set up chairs for the guests. And our friends built a simple but incredibly beautiful arch of autumn branches and wild asters. When I walked down the path to Noah, no one was leading me by the arm. And in that solitude, there was an incredible freedom that I had not expected at all. In that moment, there was no need to meet someone's expectations, to smooth over the rough edges of family relationships, or to play a role. We were watched only by those who loved us for who we were, without any buts. Our friend Daniel conducted the ceremony. He began it with words that still resonate in my heart. We are gathered here today not by the call of tradition, but by the call of love. Olivia and Noah have invited each of you to witness this moment because you are the ones who see them for who they truly are. And love them, sincerely. We read each other vows that we had written ourselves the night before. Noah promised to always support my wildest dreams, even if they changed. He promised that our home would always be a place where creativity is valued above all else. And that he would choose me, again and again, every day. I, in turn, promised to be his support in sorrow and in joy. I promised to always remember that what is between us is more important than any outside judgment. And that we would build our lives based on our shared values, not on others' expectations. The rings we exchanged were in keeping with the whole ceremony, simple, without any unnecessary fuss. Mine was a thin ring with a tiny diamond that flashed in the sun when Noah put it on my finger. With this ring, I accept your independence as a gift and promise to always be your partner, he said. We had come up with these words together too. After the ceremony, we all went to a small restaurant nearby, where I had booked a cozy private room in advance. Everything was very simple, fresh flowers on the tables and a small cake. We had dinner like one big family, passing dishes to each other and filling our glasses. Anna, Noah's mother, gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. She spoke of how she had always dreamed that her son would meet someone who would appreciate his kind and sensitive heart. And then our friends gave us a surprise. They had made a book for us, in which each guest had pasted a photo of themselves with us and written a handwritten wish. This gift was more precious and meaningful than anything money could buy. At the end of the evening, when the guests were starting to leave, Stephen, Noah's father, came up to me. He gently touched my shoulder and asked to have a word with me. "Olivia, I want you to know," he began in a low voice, "Anna and I have a feeling why your parents aren't here today. Noah told us just enough. And I want to say that we would be happy if you would let us be your second family." I hadn't realized how much I needed those words until they brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you," was all I could manage to say. "Thank you. That means a lot to me." We had no plans for a real honeymoon with palm trees and the ocean. Instead, we decided to dedicate 2 weeks to Noah's project. It was a working trip that became our best vacation. We continued to explore the old, abandoned resorts in the Catskill Mountains. Noah took pictures, and I helped him with research, but this time we weren't in a hurry to get home. We stayed in cozy little hotels and discovered places we had never been before. Throughout our trip, we never once called it a honeymoon. Our new status was our little secret, and this understatement made everything that was happening even more special and personal. In every town we stopped in, Noah took the same picture, our hands with our wedding rings against a new landscape. In this way, he created his own, intimate photo chronicle of the beginning of our life together. Returning to New York, we just continued to live as we had. On the surface, it seemed that nothing had changed. We didn't post about it on social media or order wedding cards. Our friends who had been at the ceremony carefully kept our secret. At work, I kept my maiden name. Our marriage was our quiet, personal joy, a commitment we made to each other, not to the whole world. The only visible reminder was the ring on my ring finger. I wore it with pride on the streets of New York, but instinctively hid it in my pocket when we went to Minneapolis. This little lie didn't weigh on me at all. On the contrary, it felt like a solid wall, protecting something very fragile and precious from those who were unable to appreciate it. For 6 months, our marriage was our fortress, known only to the 12 people who were with us that day, and a couple of our closest friends. During our weekly calls with my mother, I learned to masterfully evade questions about my personal life, getting by with general phrases about important projects and career plans. Once, she sighed particularly heavily into the phone. "You know, Olivia, at your age, women can't afford to be so picky. All the good men are taken quickly." I pressed the mute button on my phone to laugh heartily. Then, turning the sound back on, I calmly replied, "Mom, I'm absolutely happy with my choice." Noah and I created our own, cozy world, woven from our little traditions. Sunday brunches at our favorite coffee shop around the corner. Monthly trips to the Metropolitan Opera. Warm summer evenings on our balcony, where we tended to our tiny garden in boxes together. We learned to live together. We argued about how to properly place cups in the dishwasher and sought a compromise in the eternal battle for the thermostat. We learned each other's rhythms, and all this, far from the judgmental looks and unsolicited advice of my family. It was perhaps the most peaceful time of my life. And, as it usually happens, it was at that moment that the phone call came that changed everything. It was Chloe. She was engaged, and I realized that keeping our secret would now be much more difficult. "His name is Ethan Montgomery," Chloe said, and her voice was filled with a genuine happiness I hadn't heard in years. "Dad's law firm handles his family's affairs. We met last fall at the Whitney's charity gala." Montgomery. It was a name from the pantheon of families my parents dreamed of marrying into. Old money, an impeccable reputation, membership in the right clubs, and education at the right schools. I could almost physically feel my mother, Eleanor, smiling triumphantly on the other side of the country. "That's amazing, Chloe," I said sincerely, trying to push away my bad feelings. "I can hear in your voice how happy you are." "I am. And you'll like him, Liv. By the way, he's also interested in art. His family owns that gallery on Madison Avenue." I knew that gallery. A very exclusive place that specialized in the works of established masters, not young talents. But I appreciated Chloe's attempt to build a bridge between us. When's your big day? I asked. Next June. Mom has already taken care of everything. So get ready. She's in full delight. Full delight was too mild a word. Within a week, my phone was buzzing with notifications from the new family group chat, Chloe and Ethan's wedding. My mother, Eleanor, was actively sharing links from Pinterest, from bouquets to bridesmaid dresses. The ceremony was to be held at the Montgomery estate, with tents on perfectly manicured lawns and a string quartet as musical accompaniment. During our next call, my mother didn't even ask how I was. She went straight to the details. The Montgomery estate is just magnificent, Olivia. Imagine, the gardens will be in full bloom in June. Ethan wants 8 groomsmen, so Chloe will have 8 bridesmaids. Of course, you'll be one of them. It sounded not like a question, but a statement of fact. Even though I had never even met Ethan. Have you decided who you're going to the wedding with? She continued casually. It would be wonderful if you found someone suitable. You understand, all the relatives will be there. The word suitable sounded like a sentence. I immediately thought of Noah, of his kind eyes, his artist's hands, and his complete lack of snobbery. He was the complete opposite of the polished guys from Minneapolis that my mother so approved of. I'm seeing someone right now, I began cautiously. His name is Noah. And what does he do? Was the predictable question. He's a photographer. Quite famous, actually. His latest series of works was published in the New York Times Magazine. There was a pause on the other end of the line. Well, that sounds interesting. Are you serious? I instinctively touched my wedding ring, which I had forgotten to take off before the call. Yes, Mom. We're serious. That's great, my mother replied with unexpected cheerfulness. So you'll bring him to the engagement party next month? I've already told everyone you'll be there. The engagement party was held at one of the most exclusive country clubs in Minneapolis, the kind where you wait years for a membership and the dress code is strictly enforced. Noah and I flew in for the weekend, but decided to stay at a hotel rather than at my parents'. It was our small act of self-preservation. Right at the entrance to the club, I stopped Noah. Listen, I said, remember that tonight you're just my boyfriend. They don't know about our wedding. Noah gently squeezed my hand. I'll play along, of course. But, Liv, are you sure you want this? I wasn't sure of anything myself, but I nodded firmly. Please. Just for tonight. The party turned out to be an exact replica of my worst expectations. Champagne flowed like water, and the air was filled with conversations about country estates and private schools, and everywhere there was a subtle assessment of each guest's status and connections. My mother, Eleanor, met us at the entrance. She blew an air kiss, while her eyes quickly scanned Noah from head to toe. Liv, darling, you look so good, her standard compliment, which really meant nothing. And this, I take it, is Noah. Very nice to meet you. She extended her hand to him, but her gaze was already searching the crowd for someone more promising. My father, James, honored us with only a distracted nod before he was immediately drawn into a conversation about golf. I took Noah to meet Chloe and Ethan. My sister seemed genuinely happy to see him. She asked with interest about his photo projects. Ethan, however, was the epitome of polite restraint. His practiced smile was flawless but didn't reach his eyes at all. As the evening wore on, I began to notice how my mother was very skillfully steering certain guests away from us, mostly, the parents of unmarried sons. When she did have to introduce us, she called Noah my friend, not my partner. And at dinner, she made sure we were seated at the far end of the table, surrounded by people I didn't know, away from the main family circle. The first awkward moment happened over dessert. My Aunt Susan leaned across the table. Well, Liv, when are we going to celebrate at your wedding? The years are passing by. Before I could even open my mouth, my mother intervened. Olivia is completely focused on her career right now, Susan. Not everyone's life goes according to schedule. On the surface, it sounded like support, but her tone made it clear that she was explaining my choice, not being proud of my decisions. Later, when everyone had dispersed around the room with drinks, my mother approached me at the entrance to the ladies' room. Noah makes a pleasant impression, but let's be honest, Liv, does this relationship have a future? Conrad Bradshaw is here tonight. He was just made a partner at his firm. Maybe I should introduce you. Mom, I'm with Noah, I said firmly. We live together. We're serious. She sighed wearily. Living together is not the same as building a future together. Just look at Chloe and Ethan. That's what I call a proper union. The Montgomery family understands how important strong family ties are. The closer the wedding date came, the stronger the pressure became. The family chat was buzzing around the clock, discussing everything from dress fittings to bachelorette party plans. My mother called me every week, and every call was filled not only with news about the preparations, but also with subtle hints about my undefined status. We're sending out the invitations next week, she informed me once. Your envelope will say, Olivia and guest. But if something changes with you and Noah, just let me know. We'll fix it. Nothing will change, Mom. Well, who knows, she drawled. These creative types are so unreliable. With the arrival of spring, a series of pre-wedding events began, and it became increasingly difficult to keep our little secret. Noah and I discussed more and more often how we should behave at the wedding itself. Maybe we should just tell them? Noah suggested one evening as we were sitting on our balcony, looking at the city lights. Just get it over with. I immediately imagined my mother's reaction. Her upset, her reproaches. The way she would inevitably make our news the main topic of discussion. Let's not do it yet, I said. Chloe's wedding is so close. If we tell them now, it will cause a lot of talk that will distract from their celebration. I don't want to do that. Noah nodded. He always understood everything. Okay. So we continue to act like just a couple until June, he said. And after the wedding, we'll tell them. As June approached, I had to fly to Minneapolis twice, for Chloe's bachelorette party and for the final bridesmaid dress fitting. Each such visit was a test of my endurance. I deflected endless questions about, when is it my turn, and pretended not to notice my mother's constant comments about my appearance. What a blessing that the style of these dresses is so loose at the waist, she thoughtfully remarked during the fitting. Although if I were you, dear, I would stick to salads, not buns, before the wedding. I remained silent, biting the inside of my cheek until it hurt, and mentally repeated to myself that this was all temporary. That very soon I would return to New York, to Noah, to our real life, where such words had no power. The final straw was our final call about organizing the wedding weekend. By the way, I've booked separate hotel rooms for you and Noah, my mother announced as if it were nothing. The Montgomery family is very conservative, and you are a bridesmaid, after all. We must observe propriety. I tried to object, but she interrupted me. It's only for 2 nights, Liv. I'm sure you can bear it. For your sister's sake. This time, I agreed without arguing. I simply didn't have the strength for another pointless argument. But that same evening, as Noah and I were packing for the trip, I felt a dull irritation simmering inside me. They were trying to force us into old molds again, making us pretend that we were not who we are. And all this, for the sake of people who had never even tried to understand us. Liv, you're quiet. Is everything okay? Noah asked. No, I answered honestly. But everything will be okay as soon as this weekend is over. I couldn't have imagined how prophetic those words would be. And that this very weekend would be the denouement I had been putting off for so long. We arrived at the Cliffside Manor Hotel in Newport, Rhode Island, on Thursday, the day before the rehearsal dinner. The estate was stunning, perfectly manicured lawns sloped down to the ocean, and a line of luxury cars was parked at the main entrance. The guests arriving for the wedding greeted each other as if it were an elite college reunion. The concierge at the registration desk handed us our keys with a polite but all-knowing smile. Miss Preston, your room is in the East Wing, with the rest of the wedding party. And you, Mr. Miller, we have placed in the West Wing, with the other guests. Noah gave my hand a reassuring squeeze before we went our separate ways in the huge lobby. I found my room without difficulty. It was a spacious suite with an ocean view. On the table was a welcome basket, a bottle of champagne, expensive toiletries, and a handwritten note. The note was from Chloe. She thanked me for being there for them on this important day. Her words seemed very sincere, and I couldn't help but wonder how much of all this wedding splendor was from Chloe herself, and how much was from the boundless energy of my mother and future mother-in-law, Mrs. Montgomery. I had just managed to unpack my suitcase when the phone rang. "Liv, dear," my mother's, Eleanor's, voice chirped in the receiver. "We're all gathering on the veranda in half an hour for an aperitif. Please, wear something appropriate for the occasion. There will be a photographer to take some informal family pictures." I chose a cream silk blouse and a navy blue knee-length skirt, an outfit that I knew would not cause any complaints from my mother. After putting on some discreet makeup, I headed to the veranda. Noah was already there. He looked incredibly handsome, but he was clearly out of his element in a formal jacket, talking to one of Ethan's college friends. My father saw me first and raised his glass in greeting, without, however, interrupting his conversation with Mr. Montgomery. My mother, on the other hand, immediately flew up to me, her gaze sweeping over me with a quick assessment. "Very elegant, Liv," she said. "Although you should do something more serious with your hair for tomorrow. Chloe's stylist can help you." In the evening, we had dinner at the hotel's most fashionable restaurant. The seating arrangement at the table was more eloquent than any words. All the couples were seated together, except for Noah and me. I was placed between Ethan's brother and some of his elderly aunt. Noah ended up at the opposite end of the table, in the company of Chloe's college friends. The entire dinner was accompanied by conversations about money and status. They discussed recently purchased vacation homes, private schools where they had managed to place their children, and career promotions. When someone out of politeness asked Noah about his work, my mother immediately intervened. "Noah is a photographer," she said in a tone as if she were talking about something insignificant and awkward. "Liv, did you hear that our cousin Emily's husband was just appointed executive director at his foundation?" After dinner, when everyone had dispersed around the room, Chloe came up to me. "Are you okay, Liv? You look so tired." For a split second, I had the thought of telling her everything. About our secret wedding. About how anxiously I was awaiting this weekend. But then I looked at her happy, radiant face, and I couldn't. I didn't want to spoil this moment for her. "Just a long flight," I said in reply. "Everything is just wonderful, Chloe. Ethan seems like a wonderful person." She smiled, and there was sincere warmth in her smile. "He is. You know, you'll get to know him better soon. He's not at all like my mother and her friends, I swear." We moved away from the noise of the party, to the very edge of the ocean. "Pre-wedding jitters?" I asked gently. She shook her head. "No, it's not about Ethan. It's about you." I wanted to apologize. "For what?" "For never defending you. From Mom and Dad," she said, looking at the dark waves. "I always knew they were unfair to you. That they just didn't see how amazing you really are. And I was the favorite, and it was convenient for me. I never tried to change anything." She gave a bitter laugh. "Don't get me wrong, I love Ethan very much. But sometimes I wonder what my life would be like if they didn't influence my every step." "Thank you for saying that," I finally managed to say, feeling a lump rise in my throat. "It means a lot to me." We hugged, and it was probably the first truly sincere moment between us in many years. When we returned to the guests, I felt that a heavy burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I was no longer alone. It turned out I had an ally in this family. The morning of the wedding day was sunny but chaotic. At exactly 9 o'clock, as instructed, I arrived at Chloe's suite for the transformation. I was mentally preparing for several hours of endless sitting in a chair and posing for the photographer. The other bridesmaids were already cheerfully chirping, emptying their second or third bottle of champagne. They were reminiscing about some of their shared college stories, and I felt a little out of place in their company. I silently sat down in the chair, allowing the stylist to create a complex construction of curls on my head, and the makeup artist to apply several layers of professional makeup to my face. My mother, Eleanor, periodically came into the room to inspect the process. She gave valuable instructions to the stylist: more volume here; to the makeup artist: can you do something about those dark circles under her eyes? When, finally, we were all dressed in identical, pale pink dresses, I went to the mirror and hardly recognized myself. A perfect, glossy version of myself was looking back at me. The one my mother had always dreamed of seeing: flawless, conservative, no different from the other girls in the room. The ceremony itself was more like a ballet performance, where every movement was choreographed and rehearsed. I walked to the altar on the arm of one of Ethan's groomsmen, his lawyer friend from Harvard, who whispered investment advice to me the whole way. I dutifully stood through the long service with its mandatory readings from Shakespeare and classical music performed by a string quartet. At the moment the priest declared Chloe and Ethan husband and wife, I found Noah's eyes in the crowd of guests. He smiled at me barely noticeably, with just his eyes. And that smile was our little secret, a reminder of our own, so simple and real day. A day that was the complete opposite of this grandiose but soulless spectacle. The cocktail hour turned into a 2-hour marathon of posing. Photographers arranged endless combinations of guests for official portraits. My cheeks ached from the need to constantly keep a smile on my face, while my mother commanded the parade, arranging relatives in the correct groups. Of course, she always had critical remarks about my posture or position in the frame. "Olivia, turn a little to the right, your figure will look more flattering that way." By the time we were finally invited into the banquet tent, the sun was already setting over the ocean. Noah found me at the entrance to the tent and offered his arm. "You look stunning," he said quietly. "But I miss you in this crowd." "I miss you too," I whispered back. We were, as expected, seated at the farthest table, along with Ethan's distant relatives and his father's business partners. While dinner was being served, I watched my sister, Chloe, and her new husband. They were receiving toasts and congratulations, surrounded by guests whose presence only strengthened their high social standing. Drinks flowed like a river, and with each passing hour, the conversations became louder and the tongues sharper. My mother, Eleanor, fluttered around the room like a queen at a reception, collecting compliments for the flawless wedding. And my father, James, was already busy discussing some business opportunities with the new Montgomery relatives. Everything started to go wrong during dessert. My Aunt Susan, noticeably bolder after a few glasses of champagne, leaned across the table directly to Noah. "So, you're our Olivia's new beau? She's had quite a few, you know. They don't usually stick around for long." Noah just raised an eyebrow, but replied politely, "Actually, Olivia and I have been together for quite some time." Well, don't get used to it," she giggled. "The women in the Preston family are known for being picky. Just when you think you've figured it all out, they'll change their minds." I felt the blood rush to my face, but Noah squeezed my hand reassuringly under the table. Next came my cousin Haley, flashing her engagement ring. "Don't worry, Olivia," she said with false sympathy. "Your time will come too. They say career women are in fashion now." The pressure mounted with each such comment. When the music started, Noah led me to the dance floor. It was a short, silent escape in his arms. "We can leave right now," he whispered. "A little longer," I replied. "I don't want to attract attention." But the stage was already being set for us. After Chloe and Ethan cut their giant cake, and the waiters began to serve it to the guests, my mother gathered our entire family at the main table. "A moment of your attention," her voice rang out over the buzz of the crowd. "Another toast to our newlyweds." The guests politely turned to her. Noah and I were standing on the edge of the family circle, and I felt his warm hand on my back. "Today is everything a mother could wish for her daughter," Eleanor began, her eyes glistening with emotion. "My Chloe's wedding was flawless. A perfect couple, a perfect celebration, a perfect union of two families. My father, James, proudly hugged Chloe's shoulders. Then my mother turned to me, and her smile became icy. "Well, when is your turn, Liv?" Her voice rang out in the ensuing silence. "Time is running out." Several relatives chuckled quietly. My Aunt Susan nodded approvingly, nearly spilling her champagne. "Such potential," my mother continued with a note of false sympathy. "But soon, I'm afraid, there will be no one left to choose from. Only leftovers will remain." The laughter grew louder. I felt Noah's muscles tense beside me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw the smile fade from Chloe's face, replaced by a grimace of embarrassment. Ethan stared at his plate. And at that moment, something snapped. All the years of petty jabs, humiliations, and the constant feeling that I was not right, suddenly compressed into a single moment of blinding clarity. I had had enough. Enough of hiding my happiness. Enough of being afraid of their reaction. A smile appeared on my face, not the strained and polite one I had worn all weekend, but a real one, full of relief. "It already happened," I said. My voice was calm but clear. 9 months ago, actually. You just weren't invited." The room fell silent. The glass in my mother's hand froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "What are you talking about, Olivia?" she asked with a nervous laugh. "Don't be ridiculous." I took Noah's hand, intertwining our fingers. "Noah and I got married in October. It was a small ceremony in the Hudson Valley, with only those who love and accept us for who we are." My mother's face turned white as a sheet, and my father sat down abruptly, setting down his glass. "You got married? And didn't tell us anything?" My mother's voice broke into a shriek. "How could you be so selfish, so disrespectful to your own family?" "This day wasn't about you, Mom," I replied evenly. "It was about us. About starting our marriage in accordance with our values, not putting on a show that fits your status." Aunt Susan gasped. My cousins began to whisper, enjoying the outrage. But then, to my astonishment, Chloe took a step forward, standing between me and my mother. "Congratulations, Olivia," she said loudly and clearly. "And Noah. Welcome to the family, officially." She extended her hand to Noah, and he shook it gratefully. "Did you know?" my mother demanded, looking at Chloe. "No," she replied calmly. "But I respect Olivia's choice. And we should all do the same." Ethan came and stood next to his new wife. "We're very happy for you," he added. And for the first time all weekend, his smile seemed genuine to me. My father, James, cleared his throat. He looked extremely awkward, but at least he was trying. "Well, that's certainly unexpected." He nodded at Noah. "We'll definitely need to talk." But my mother was not ready to give up. "How could you hide something like this from us? What will people think now? That we didn't deserve to be at our own daughter's wedding?" "What people think has always mattered more to you than how I feel," I replied quietly. "That's exactly why we made that decision." The tension in the air became almost palpable. The guests at the neighboring tables were desperately pretending not to be listening, but they were catching every word. My mother looked around and suddenly realized that her reaction had become public knowledge. "We'll talk about this at home," she snapped. "This is not the place or the time." "I agree," I nodded. "Today is Chloe and Ethan's day. I'm sorry for drawing attention to ourselves." I turned to my sister and her husband. "Your wedding is beautiful. I wish you both all the best." My sincerity was obvious. Noah and I tried to step aside, to return to the celebration. But my mother was not going to let us go. "How dare you?" Her voice was quiet but full of indignation. She caught up with us a few steps away. "After everything we've done for you, and this is your gratitude? Running away with this?" "With my husband," I finished firmly. "A talented and kind man who supports me in everything. You always only thought about yourself, Olivia. But this is going too far." Then Noah spoke, his voice was calm but firm. Mrs. Preston, I love your daughter very much. And I hope that one day, through your disappointment, you will be able to see what an incredible person she is." My mother was momentarily speechless, stunned by his directness. Before she could find a reply, my father, James, appeared next to her and put a hand on her shoulder. "Eleanor, not here," he said quietly. Then he looked at me, and his gaze was a mixture of many emotions. "We need to talk tomorrow. Before you leave." I nodded, grateful to him for this intervention. "Okay. Tomorrow." We stepped aside, and I realized that I couldn't pretend anymore. "It's time to go," I said to Noah. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely." We slipped out of the tent unnoticed, collected our things from our separate rooms, and left. I texted my father that we would meet him for breakfast in the morning. When the lights of Cliffside Manor disappeared in the rearview mirror, I felt an incredible sense of relief. My phone immediately started vibrating with messages, from an angry, "How could you humiliate your mother like that?" from Aunt Susan to a surprisingly supportive one from my cousin Jason. "It's about time someone put Aunt Eleanor in her place. Congratulations on getting married." Chloe sent a short, "Love you. Let's talk." Noah and I got a room at a small hotel in the next town over. Finally, we could just be husband and wife. In the evening, lying in bed, I replayed the day's events in my head. "How are you?" he asked, hugging me. "More than just, how," I replied. "I feel like I can breathe deeply for the first time in a long time." The next day, we flew back to New York. We spent the entire flight in silence, each mentally replaying the events of the past weekend. Breakfast with my father was short and tense. He tried to be pleasant, alternating between clumsy congratulations and gentle reproaches for doing everything in secret. My mother didn't join us, citing a headache. "She'll calm down," my father said, although there was no confidence in his voice. "She just needs to get used to the idea." I listened to him and was surprised to realize that her approval was no longer a vital necessity for me. It was a strange feeling. As if I had been on a carousel my whole life, trying to catch the golden ring, and only now, having jumped off, did I realize that I had never needed it. This thought was both light and a little dizzying. Our New York apartment greeted us with silence and comfort. What a stark contrast it was to the cold luxury of the hotel. Unpacking my suitcase, I came across that pale pink bridesmaid dress, a tangible reminder of all the drama of that weekend. "And what am I supposed to do with this now?" I asked Noah, holding it up. He thought for a second. "Do whatever you think is right. You can keep it as a memento, you can donate it to charity. Or save it for Halloween." I smiled, carefully put the dress back in its garment bag, and hung it in the closet. "I'll decide later," I said. "Right now, I just want to be home. With you. And just be us." The first few weeks after the wedding were just as difficult as I had expected. My mother was demonstratively silent, for the first time in many years breaking the tradition of our weekly calls. My father sent one short letter in which he asked me to be patient while they process everything. Chloe called as soon as she got back from her honeymoon. She genuinely tried to support me, but at the same time, she conveyed our parents' position. "They're taking it very hard," she said. "They feel like they've been rejected. Mom keeps saying that she can't understand how you could not invite them to such an important day," she explained. "And Dad, he's more upset than angry." "I think so. I'm not sure they'll ever be able to truly understand," I replied. "But I hope that one day they'll at least be able to accept the fact that it was our decision, Noah's and mine." The reaction of Noah's parents was the complete opposite. They called the same day we told them what had happened at the wedding. "Are you guys okay? Is everything all right?" Anna's voice was full of genuine concern. "That must have been very difficult." "We're fine," I assured her. "Even better. It feels like a heavy weight has been lifted from my shoulders." "That weight was never yours to carry," she replied gently. "But I know how hard it can be to break free from old family habits. Just know that we're here if you need anything." A few weeks passed, and I began to build new, healthier boundaries. When my mother finally called, almost a month after the wedding, her tactics were predictable, a mixture of wounded pride and an attempt at manipulation. "Well, are you satisfied? Did you get your way?" she began without a greeting. "Did you even think about how your father is feeling right now? He's completely devastated. He dreamed of walking his youngest daughter down the aisle." Previously, such a reproach would have thrown me off balance, but this time I felt only a surprising calm. "I'm very sorry if Dad is upset. We didn't want that," I replied. "But our wedding was a reflection of our relationship with Noah. We wanted to have only those who accept us for who we are, without any conditions, with us on that day. So, we don't accept you? After everything we've done for you? Mom, you accepted and supported the version of me that you invented. Not the real me." The conversation ended on that note, without reaching any agreement. But when I hung up, for the first time, I didn't feel empty. I felt strong. Because I was able to tell the truth, calmly, without anger and without apologies. Gradually, very slowly, a new balance of power began to form in our family. Some relatives, like my Aunt Susan, preferred to keep a cold distance. But others, to my surprise, began to reach out. They wrote short messages with congratulations, asking how our wedding went. The most unexpected was a letter from my cousin Emily, with whom I had never been particularly close. "I admire what you did," she wrote. "The way you stood up for yourself and for your marriage. I have allowed my mother to make all the decisions for me for years, and your example has made me think about a lot of things." 4 months after Chloe's wedding, Noah and I decided it was time to have our own small celebration. We planned a small reception in New York for those who couldn't be at our ceremony. We invited Noah's family, all of our friends, and, taking a deep breath, sent an invitation to my parents and sister. A few days later, a reply came from my father. He wrote that they would come. It was a small but very important step towards each other. Our reception was held at the same small restaurant where we had celebrated our wedding. We wanted everything to be simple and homey, delicious food, a few warm toasts, and no official program. Noah's parents, Anna and Stephen, flew in from Michigan, bringing with them a box of homemade cookies and their unfailing warmth. But the main surprise was the appearance of Chloe and Ethan. "We couldn't miss this," Chloe said, hugging me tightly. "Besides, it's time to get to know my brother-in-law better." To my relief, Noah and Ethan hit it off instantly. They discovered a shared passion for old film cameras and spent almost the entire evening engrossed in a discussion of lenses and shutter speeds. My parents arrived late and left early. They were stiff the whole evening, but it was clear they were trying. My mother, Eleanor, managed to force out a dry "congratulations," and even handed over a gift, a set of 2 engraved silver candlesticks that would have fit perfectly in her interior, but were completely out of place in ours. It wasn't a perfect reconciliation. But it was progress. Imperfect, slow, but still progress. Months went by, and my relationship with Chloe grew deeper, which I had never expected. Freed from our usual roles of golden child and disappointment, we were finally able to see each other not as rivals, but as 2 adult women, each with her own life and her own view of the world. She flew to New York twice that year, once with Ethan, and the second time alone. And each time she stayed with Noah and me, not in a soulless hotel. During her solo visit, we walked along the Hudson River waterfront. At one point, she confessed, "You know, I've always been jealous of your courage, Liv. The way you went your own way, despite all their pressure." "And I was jealous of your ease," I replied. "The way you seemed to effortlessly meet all their expectations." She laughed humorlessly. "It only seemed that way. I just learned to better hide everything they wouldn't approve of." "Like what?" "Like the fact that I hate my job in law and dream of teaching at a college. Or that I had panic attacks in my last year of business school." She kicked a pebble with her foot. "I'm just learning to be myself. Ethan is helping me a lot with that. Sometimes I think he sees me better than I see myself." This new, ringing honesty between us became a real medicine. We were building a new relationship, based not on who our parents wanted us to be, but on who we really were. My marriage with Noah only grew stronger after going through these difficulties. We weathered this storm together, and it brought us closer than ever. We learned to understand each other better, to notice when old family scenarios were trying to influence our reactions, and to talk openly about our fears and needs. You know what I love most about us? Noah asked one evening as we were sitting on the balcony. We choose to be together every day. Not because we have to or someone expects it, but because we both want it. A year after that very wedding of Chloe's, my relationship with my parents reached a new, shaky, but more honest level. My mother, Eleanor, grudgingly but still began to admit that my life in New York with Noah was a success story, even if it wasn't written according to her script. When they first came to visit us, I watched her walk around our apartment, looking at the pictures on the walls, the books on the shelves, all the care we had put into creating our nest. "You've done well for yourself, Olivia," she finally said. For her, that was tantamount to a standing ovation. My father, James, in his quiet way, had progressed much further. During that visit, he asked Noah to show him his photographs and listened to his explanations with genuine interest. And later, when we were alone, he said, "He's a good guy, Olivia. Now I understand why you chose him." But the real freedom lay in something else. In the fact that I had stopped measuring my own worth by their approval. I had built a life that had everything I loved: creativity, an interesting job, real, deep relationships. And the fact that they accepted this life of mine or not no longer had any effect on my personal sense of happiness. Looking back, I realized that my secret wedding was not just a way to avoid family drama. It was my manifesto. My declaration that from now on, I would live by my own rules. And that scene at Chloe's wedding, it wasn't a catastrophe, as it seemed to me then. It was the very push that launched a long overdue healing process. Sometimes I think, would I have done the same, knowing everything I know now? Maybe not. Perhaps I would have found the strength to invite them to the wedding, but having set all the boundaries in advance. But I don't regret the path that led me to where I am now. To this peace and harmony. In the end, I learned the main lesson. A real family, whether by blood or by spirit, is built on acceptance, not on expectations. Love that requires you to become smaller so that someone else can be more comfortable is not love. And sometimes the most important thing you can do is to simply stop hiding your true self. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between your family's expectations and being true to yourself? If so, how did you handle it? I would love to read your stories, so please share them in the comments below. Let's create a space here where we can talk about this openly.